Hello everyone, my name is Chloe, and in this video we will be discussing the 6 queens of Six the Musical, and whether or not the show is historically accurate to each queen. I am not an expert, nor do I claim to be. This is just for fun, nor do I question or make fun of Lucy and Toby's abilities and knowledge. This is just to discuss what really happened versus what they decided to put in the musical. And history itself may not be 100% accurate, so they can only take what they can find as well. The show opens up with each queen introducing herself to the audience and why she's significant. And Katherine of Aragon goes first, and I think these lyrics are relatively accurate. Katherine and Henry were married for 24 years before divorcing her for Anne Boleyn. Technically, Henry broke England from the church and established himself the head of the church, but Anne might be saying and referencing that he became head of the church for her, because of her, not necessarily she herself thinks that she's head of the church, so it's kind of misleading for what really happened to Anne. To me, in my opinion, when I listened to this song for the first time, well, my sleeves may be green, but my lipstick's red, kind of makes me think that she's saying, I may look innocent and I didn't do anything, but my lipstick's red, the color of scandal, love, and lust, which would insinuate that she really was guilty of these charges, which is not true. So I'm not really sure what they were getting at, but she was, for what I know, was not guilty of the incest and adultery that she was originally charged with. Jane Seymour, I can't say for sure if Henry really loved Jane or not. He only loved her for giving him a son. There's really no way of knowing, but it's very possible, which in that case, while it wouldn't be a lie for her, it would technically be inaccurate, but I'm not going to nitpick every little word. To me, when she says that when she's not what she seems, but to stick around and will suddenly see more, she's insinuating that throughout the musical, she'll reveal that she's much more than the queen who died giving birth to the future monarch. But honestly, in the musical and in history, that's pretty much all we know about her. We know a little bit about her childhood, but it's not much, and then she died at age 28. So it's funny that they insinuate that there's more to the story with her song Heart of Stone, but I think that in that song, it really only solidifies what we know about her and how she felt about Henry and Edward, and we don't really know much else. Anne of Cleves, this one is probably top 3 most historically inaccurate songs. Not that he rejected her because he did, but in the snippet of her song Get Down, she insinuates that she rejoices, but he rejected her for what history says that Henry rejected her for, and that's not really the case. He did have Hans Holbein paint her portrait, and he did choose her out of the other women, but the only reason he rejected her was because the day she came to England, he decided to test her love and dress up in a disguise and go up and kiss her, and if it was true love, she wouldn't refuse and kiss him back. But she, a young girl from Germany, had much different customs and traditions than England had. When he kissed her, she wasn't really expecting that, and when she pushed him away and refused his advances, and even stated that she was betrothed and couldn't kiss him, that's when he kind of got it into his head that she didn't like him, and so he changed his mind about marrying her. But it was already too late, and his hands were tied, and they wed January 1540. I personally think that makes her even a better wife to reject all the men's advances because you're already married to show loyalty, but I guess Henry didn't see it that way. So in history, and these little snippets implies that Katherine was basically a hoe, but then in Katherine's song, All You Want to Do, changes the tone and message and tells an entirely different story and portrays her as a sexual assault victim, which is true, she was. I guess you could say the lock up your husband's, lock up your son's part can be interpreted as get them away from me, I don't want to be touched again, but the rest of the lyrics surrounding these words, it really suggests no such thing and suggests that you need to lock them up to prevent them from getting turned on by Katherine, almost putting the fault on the men's actions of their sexual immorality, which is very victim-blaming mindset. Maybe that wasn't the writer's intention, because they have stated that they do see her as a victim and a victim of sexual assault, so maybe I'm looking too much into it, but if you really break down the lyrics, that's kind of what they are saying. With Katherine Parr, this is pretty accurate. Just like Katherine of Aragon's part, pretty straightforward. She was the surviving wife, and she survived Henry by a year and a half. She eventually died a year later to childbed fever, giving birth to her first child, which we can only assume passed away young, given that there really isn't much information about her daughter out there. I personally think that no way Katherine of Aragon's song is the most accurate when it comes to what they do mention. Like, she was married to Arthur, and she did come from Spain to do so. She didn't know any English, just like Anne of Cleves, but eventually did learn it before having to marry Henry, since she was married to his brother first. What is unfortunately not mentioned was that she was the ambassador of the Aragonese crown in 1507 before she married Henry in 1509. My favorite fact about Catherine is that the show fails to mention is that she led an entire army into battle while she was pregnant while Henry was sick. She was an incredible warrior. I know you only get one song to explain everything leading up to the divorce and the whole reason of the whole thing, but I really would have liked to see them explore that a little more with her backstory or other things that she accomplished in her marriage, because 24 years is a long time, and she lived to be over half a century. So, yeah, but I do think it is pretty accurate of what they do mention. I don't think they were trying to copy her speech from the king. When he tried to send her to a nunnery, she gave a very powerful speech to the king, and I did read that on the Tudors when she was giving that speech in the show The Tudors, that it was word for word for what Catherine really did say to Henry in real life, which is pretty cool. I'm sure in her opening monologue, she was trying to resemble a modern depiction of him having an affair by saying that he was coming home late and had his lipstick on his ruff, calling her a side chick, which I absolutely love. It's so funny. She definitely has amazing comedic timing. The pretty young thing and son that she mentioned was Elizabeth Blunt, and her son Henry Fitzroy, and that was named after King Henry. He ended up getting her pregnant out of wedlock, and she had her child, and he is the only illegitimate son that Henry publicly acknowledged. That was pretty accurate. He was born in 1519. She took it with grace and poise and held her head high and publicly accepted Henry. Unfortunately, he fell ill and died as a small child. My favorite part of this song was when she was singing about how he read Leviticus, which is actually absolutely true. The Bible verse she was referencing is, if a man takes his brother's wife, it is severe defilement, and he has disgraced his brother, and they shall be childless. And that freaked him out, and instead of using his head and thinking rationally, he freaked out and quickly sought out for an annulment, thinking that that was the very reason that they weren't having boys and only having girls, and God wouldn't grant him a son. Basically using misinterpreted Bible text and taking it out of context to suit his own agenda, which honestly would prove time and time again that this would not be the last time he would do something like this. It's an incredible song and relatively accurate as opposed to some of the other words in the other songs. So yeah, it's definitely a great song. I love how they mention Henry Fitzroy. I would think that they would forget to mention him, but they actually did, so that's actually really great. Don't Lose Your Head is probably one of my least favorite songs when it comes to accuracy. It definitely is catchy and it's funny, and I sing it all the time, but if you're comparing it to its historical sites, it's closer to just a fun song than historically accurate. Anne was born and spent most of her childhood in Hever Castle in Kent, England. Anne was educated in France, but nowhere does it mention that she grew up in France, but she does have ties to France. She was educated by Margaret of Austria and in the Netherlands later on. She did, however, live at English court, so maybe it was just a rhyming or rhythm convenience for the song versus accuracy. She did arrive in England in 1522, so that is accurate. When the song fails to mention was that Henry actually initially had interest in her sister, Mary Boleyn, not Anne at first. Mary was a mistress before Anne was, and Anne actually had refused his advances until he broke off his marriage with Catherine. So that was definitely in Henry's motivation to break it off with her, which is most likely what caused him to search in the Bible for the Leviticus verse, which, to be honest, he definitely does not deserve the respect at all, but he would at least be a little closer to having respect if he just owned up to the fact he just didn't want to be with Catherine because he met Anne than coming up with some elaborate scheme. I wish the song had mentioned Mary and the importance to Anne becoming the next Queen of England, but they don't bring her up at all. I do think the song is fairly accurate when it says that her dad put her up to everything. He was very power-hungry and used his daughters to boost himself up. Now, when the letters are mentioned, when Anne and Henry did actually exchange letters from that point on. It kind of goes off a little off track after that point. Both Anne and Mary became Katherine of Aragon's ladies-in-waiting, and she implied by saying that what was I meant to do, because she was living with his wife and was trying to pursue that, but because of the scenario of why shouldn't I have an affair with him, taking Anne's real dignity and saying no and refusing the king's advances away. Anne saying no and refusing is part of what led Henry to seek a divorce. So I just felt like if she did accept his advances before the divorce, that Henry would have no reason to divorce and he could just have his cake and eat it too, like he did with Elizabeth Blount. I think that Henry was just growing tired of Catherine and not giving her a son, so he just ditched her for the much younger Anne. The course almost hints that because she was saying sorry for what she said, she was explaining why when she never said anything, she didn't do anything to make Henry execute her. He created a plot to get rid of her and lay all the random charges on her she never committed. He just wanted a son and she couldn't give him one, so he moved on to Jane Seymour. He just wanted a son and she couldn't give him one, so he grew tired of her, and that's basically all that he did. So he executed her and was free to marry Jane. It was accurate, however, that she didn't want to be in a threesome and picked her over Catherine and that he can't have both. The line, "Don't be bitter," was pretty funny. The song hints that because she dissed Catherine and that's why she was executed, but that's not true at all. She didn't say anything about Catherine at all that would cause him to want to execute her. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't believe that she would have said anything like that to get executed, yet again blaming Anne for her execution, which I really don't think she was at fault. And talking about how Henry started the English Reformation and broke England from the church was historically accurate, and him cheating was historically accurate. I just wish they mentioned her giving birth to the future monarch, Queen Elizabeth I, because she did have 3 miscarriages and had Elizabeth, but they don't mention that. They only mention the miscarriages, so I think that that's kind of sad because that's a very important part to the Tudor history. So she did mention how he accused her of being a witch, which is true. There were charges of witchcraft, but the adultery thing was actually not true. They never mentioned the adultery. They never mentioned the adultery or incest or anything like that. She said that I wouldn't be such a if you could get it up, and that continues to say that the reason why he wanted to execute her was that was the reason why he wanted to execute her, which was extremely inaccurate. And it goes back to the course one more time. So all the song really does is confirm the false charges against her and admitting she was guilty when she wasn't. But then again, I'm wondering if they wrote the song as if she was guilty of those things, which in that case the song is amazing, but I totally see her reacting like that. Hans Holbein was a painter from the Tudor era from 1526 to 28 and then 1534 to 1543. He was a famous painter for the ladies, for Henry, for potential wives. He was famous for painting the portrait of Anne of Cleves, Henry's 4th wife. Their marriage was by far the shortest of all 6 marriages Henry had, lasting only 6 months. The song basically just talks about Hans himself as a person and his profession, not necessarily about Anne of Cleves specifically. Hans was sent to paint both Anne and her sister Amelia, and Henry picked Anne due to her beauty, but was very upset when he saw her in person and that she looked nothing like her portrait and had been deceived, or maybe that's just what history says and wants you to think. The song basically just goes over the fashion choices and trends of the time period, and with the corsets and the beauty standards back then. The lead makeup they talked about was the powder that women put on their face to make them look paler than they really are. Queen Elizabeth I, Anne Boleyn's daughter, was very famous for this. They had specific measurement standards as well, and that they didn't want their waist over 9 inches. As long as you follow the beauty standards, you'll be fine, is the message that they're trying to get across, because back in that time, that's how you were able to be beautiful. They even had a fashion trend where you use your urine to make your hair blonder, and I think that this song is mostly historically accurate for what they're discussing. It's literally just spitting fashion trends back then for the song, and I think that he also used all that stuff that they discussed in the song and in his portraits, if you look at his portraits. So I definitely think out of all of the songs, while this is more of a side song or just a entertainment for laughs song, I definitely do think that the song is pretty historically accurate, as well as really fun and funny. The song Get Down is Anne of Cleves' song. She did have a palace and that she herself owned without her husband. I obviously can't say if every single line of this song is accurate or not, in the sense of confirming or denying that she did or didn't do any of these things, just because there isn't any record of what specifically she did. Unfortunately, just like Jane Seymour, there really isn't a ton of specific information on her. She was a very wealthy woman, and the song mainly just focuses on what happened after Henry rejected her and then divorcing her. She sings about how she's gonna hang the portrait up that he rejected for everyone to see. I would say that that is the least accurate part of the song. Not that she hung it up or not, but that she states that he rejected her for her looks, because she is just going with what the pop culture says, not what actually happened. She claims for hanging the ugly picture up because he thought she was ugly, which is not actually why he rejected her. So yet again, going with the generic history that versus what actually happened. But I must say that despite not having 100% accurate, this is a pretty fire song. This is my friend's favorite song of the Six Queens. I love singing the song. It's a very enjoyable song despite the inaccuracies. The good thing about such a fire song is I really don't think anyone minds and it's not 100% accurate because it's such a fire song. So I enjoy it either way. I would like to say, however, that some cool facts about Anne is that she outlived King Henry and all of his wives. She was actually the last one to die, including Katherine Parr, his surviving wife. So I think that that's pretty cool. And also, there was the whole reason why he married her in the first place was to form an alliance between England and Germany. So he picked her, and obviously that didn't work out. But when he divorced her, he gave her a settlement of a lot of money and a palace and everything she could ever want. So, and she got to stay single for forever because she didn't need a man at that point, because back then women weren't financially stable and didn't have jobs and couldn't really do much, so they had to depend on their husbands, so they had to get married. But because she had her own riches and had her own estate and everything, that she didn't really see the need to marry again, and she didn't want to, so she was actually a pretty cool person. And the Henry actually referred to her as the king's sister, and she was invited back to court and a lot of times and came back to visit, and was actually really good friends with Katherine Howard, his next queen. So it's kind of there's kind of a lot of stuff that the song doesn't mention that I think is some pretty cool historical facts when it comes to Anne of Cleves. And while she probably has the most boring marriage, just because it was the shortest one and she was only married for 6 months, I definitely think that there is some different facts that they could have totally threw in there, which would have made the song very interesting, factually. But I totally understand why the writers went with this choice, because honestly, I think it's probably how Anne felt. If I'm going to be completely honest, that's because, I mean, why wouldn't you? So I definitely think this is a pretty cool song. I have a lot to say about this song. It first starts out as a fun, innocent song and slowly morphs into a deeply sad and gut-wrenching song about everything poor Katherine endured in her short life. Katherine Howard first goes on to talk about Henry Mannix. He tried to seduce Katherine when she was about 12 years old. Obviously, 12 or 13 doesn't matter, both illegal and creepy and gross. They might have just said 13 to reference Jennifer Garner's movie 13 Going on 30, which has the same theme of growing up too fast and maturing and starting things way too young. He was her music teacher, and she made references that there may have been more than just playing music going on. Of course, at just 13, to have an older man's attention is probably, it's really gross and creepy, and given that he was in his mid to late 20s, they probably just used 23 to rhyme with 30. But like I said, either way, to get into a full-grown adult relationship and getting in a relationship with a 13-year-old is gross. She describes what happened with them behind closed doors, and if you really break it down, it's really quite gross on his part. She goes on to say that she thinks he's the one because he touches her and makes love to her, and showing her innocence and her childlike mindset about the situation. Mannix claimed to have a relationship with her, and then the Dowager Duchess sent her away after catching them claiming to have a relationship with her. And then she goes on to talk about Frances Durham, which was the Dowager Duchess's secretary. Durham also had a distant connection to Thomas Howard, which was Catherine's uncle. Catherine grew up with the Dowager Duchess from age 10, and they were rumored to have a sexual relationship, and that's when she got kicked out and sent to be a waiting and waiting for Henry. She was found to have, quote-unquote, fondled him, and she gave an innuendo that she would service him in his office. It was rumored that she granted him access to the girls' room so he can come in to make good cheer, that everything even went as far as calling each other husband and wife. It then goes back to the chorus again, and she sings that part again. She suggests that Henry, who made her lady-in-waiting in the song, which in real life the Dowager Duchess and her caught her in Durham when she was sent away to go live at the palace to be a lady-in-waiting of Anne of Cleves, which was Henry's wife at the time. It then goes back to the chorus again, and she then talks about how she met Thomas Culpeper while living with the king and working for the king, and he almost had 10 years on her, and unfortunately, as fate would have it, he followed her to court, and Henry would find out about her indiscretions. The very end talks about her downfall, and while it doesn't mention specifically what happens, basically Henry finds out that Mannix and Durham, finds out about Mannix and Durham, and even finds letters that about Thomas Culpeper that him and Catherine sent back and forth. He then imprisons all of them, and they're questioned and tortured until they admit they had relations with Catherine, and then Catherine ended up being confined to her chambers at Hampton Court. An act of Parliament created a new law which allowed Catherine to be charged and executed on adultery. And the end of the song is when Catherine finally realizes how taken advantage she was and how badly the men treated her, and whether or not she had a hand to play in her downfall or it was all a scheme from the higher power, that she was, I think we can all agree that she was way too young and not experienced enough to be getting into what she got into, and she definitely did not deserve the fate that she got. History says the day of her arrest, she broke free of the guards and ran through the halls screaming, begging for her life, trying to find Henry, and ran into his study, but he wasn't at the castle the day of her arrest. Whether that was just a rumor or that was actually true, it's absolutely tragic either way. Thank you everyone so much for watching. I had a really good time. I know that I wasn't able to cover every little detail, but, this video is already too long. So, with that, I would like to say thank you for everyone for watching, and please tune in, like, and subscribe, and I will see you guys later.